You may wonder how many ohms there are, but a different way of doing ohm. I used to do this sometimes in San Diego, and I used to do it at Ridgely Manor, but it's been many years since I tried it. But what I'll do is I'll start saying a prolonged ohm, and everybody join me in the ohm, but let us continue with the ohm for some time, staggering our breathing. There's a tendency, if I say ohm for a long time and you say ohm with me and I stop to start again, everybody stops at the same time and we start again at the same time, we stop at the same time, start again at the same time. The purpose here is to keep ohm going continuously. So if I stop to take a breath, don't everybody stop to take a breath. You go a little bit further and somewhere in between take a breath, so that the ohm continues. And what you find is that it comes to a natural end, where it just begins to die down, and then we let it in. So. So now we will talk about the four antarangas, the inner limbs of yoga. The first four are considered bahirangas, the outer limbs of yoga, up through pranayama. Though pranayama certainly should be a transitional anga, because though it's concerned with a physical practice, the purpose of the physical practice is to control the mind. And through pranayama itself, again, one can attain to a high state, not just by manipulating the breath and all of that, but through the control of prana, which comes through the control of the breath. Then the control of prana calms the mind, and eventually it brings the mind to cessation. And so pranayama itself can take us a long way, just as he said, Patanjali, being he, as he said with Ishvara Pranidhana, surrender to God, that can take you to Samadhi. Ishvara Pranidhana. So, but now we move on from Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama to Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. These four last of the angas. And let me just say, just for interest's sake, you may not be interested, but I'm interested, so I'm going to tell you. I mentioned that the Ashtanga Yoga system, some think that it is a system that was sort of added into Patanjali's system of Kriya Yoga. And as I said, the reason for that is you can take out the Ashtanga Yoga from the text, and the text reads as a whole. If you showed it to an intelligent, analytical, educated person, but who didn't know about the Ashtanga Yoga, and they studied the Yoga Sutras without those sutras on Ashtanga Yoga, they wouldn't know anything was missing. It would read as a whole, and so that's one of the ways that textual analysis, scholarly textual analysis, academic textual analysis, tries to determine whether something has been added in or not. And so there's some people, Western scholars, are continually trying to tear things apart, analyzing and leaving things in parts, disassembled parts, and saying that's the way they should remain, as disassembled parts. Whereas the Indian mind is far more synthetic, interested in wholes, but interested in seeing how things hold together and the value of the whole. And so there's no reason to think that even if you take out the 8 limbs of yoga from Patanjali's yoga, there's no reason to think that somebody else added it in. We can't know now. That there's no historical record to show whether somebody else added it or whether Patanjali himself quoted it. And so, not knowing, it's better to go with the tradition. If we know, then we can say, yes, this was added by somebody later. But when we don't know, then we should stay with the tradition and say that, no, this forms a part of the yoga, but Patanjali himself, as Georg Feuerstein, the author of this translation, as he says, that he believes Patanjali himself added that in because it adds value. And certainly, as I said, the Ashtanga Yoga system stands on its own glory because it has been used for so many centuries, for millennia. So it stands on its own glory. So even if we take this view that it was something that Patanjali himself probably added into the Yoga Sutras, that doesn't discount its value. It stands in its own glory. But that's why. And just the thing I also wanted to add was when I was doing the research on Swamiji's complete works, Swami Vivekananda's complete works, I had a similar situation with a beautiful text in Swamiji called On Jnana Yoga. No, it's not On Jnana Yoga. What is it, the title? I forget the title of it now. But it is a series of talks that are all combined into a text on Jnana Yoga. It's not in the book Jnana Yoga, but it's in the complete works elsewhere, which are notes from talks he gave in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in Boston and Cambridge. And there it was discovered that certain portions, from time to time, you'd find a passage of a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, that were quoted verbatim from inspired talks. And so we found that if you take those out, the text itself on the practice of Jnana Yoga, it reads much better. And so then we discovered that Swami Saradanandaji, the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, when he was in New England and knew both Miss Waldo, who put together the inspired talks, and Sarah Bull, in whose house these talks were given in Boston and Cambridge, that he had had access to Miss Waldo's notes on the talks, inspired talks given in upstate New York at Thousand Island Park. And at that time, those were not published, and she had not published them. And so he found the beautiful passages from inspired talks and put them in appropriate places into this text on Jnana Yoga. But that's was an interesting analogy to the way that they have come to the conclusion that this also was something that's added in. Because when you take those passages out, which are beautiful in themselves, but they're no longer necessary because now Inspired Talks itself has been published. And one of our trustees, Swami Prabhanandaji, had told me that in the complete works you should take out repetitions, things that, because Swamiji never quoted himself. He didn't say the same paragraph in 2 different places. If he spoke on exactly the same topic, there would always be a difference in the way he presented it. And so anyway, that was an interesting exercise for me in the complete works. So now, the next of the angas, of the limbs of yoga, is pratyahara. And but before coming to that, let me read chapter 253 of the Yoga Sutras, after he's spoken about pranayama, and says from that tatakshiyate prakashavaranam, that from the practice of pranayama, the veil to the inner light is removed through the practice of pranayama. And then he says, dharanasu cha yogyata manasaha. And through the practice of pranayama comes yogyata, fitness, for the mind's practice of concentration, dharana. But then he interjects another step between pranayama or the 8 limbs, interjects another step in between pranayama and dharana, and that is pratyahara. And pratyahara means to withdraw the outgoing senses. Swami Sarvapriyanandaji, he mentioned in one of his talks, I think it was yesterday, Beautiful verse in the Katha Upanishad, where Yama, the one delivering the Katha Upanishad, says, Parang chikani vyatrinat swayambhu tasmad parang pashyati nantaratman kasti dhira pratyagatmanam ichan avrita chakshur
Amritatvam ichan.
Amritatvam ichan, avrita chakshur.
Kaschid dhira pratyagatmanam aikshat.
Aikshat. Oh, yes.
Avrita chakshur amritatvam.
Yeah, that's right. The ichan comes at the end. Yes, that's right. Aikshat and then ichan. Yes, thank you. So the creator wounded the senses. The creator of the senses wounded them so that they point outwards. And therefore we see that which is without, but we don't see the inner self. But some great wise soul desiring saw the inner self, desiring immortality. And so the idea is that the senses are wounded so that they only go outward. We don't see inwardly, we don't hear inwardly, we don't perceive inwardly. So it's not talking about actually seeing with the eyeballs, that the eyes should have been turned that way, and the ears should have been turned in that way, and we should smell our insides. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that our perception is directed outward by the senses. But some great wise soul turned their attention inward, desiring immortality, and there saw the light of the self. The light because it's not this light. It's called light because light illumines, the physical light we know illumines, and that light is what illumines even this light. But it's not because it's made out of photons or light waves. So, again, pratyahara means turning the attention within, turning it away from the senses, the outgoing senses. And so this is in preparation to dharana, which is concentration of the mind, dhyana, which is further concentration, which becomes a continuing tendency, and then finally samadhi, where even the sense that I am meditating disappears. And we'll get to the distinctions between these states in a moment, but concentration is, again, dharana. Concentration is focusing the mind, attempting to focus the mind. But pratyahara, how can we focus the mind until we have withdrawn the senses? So he gives this other step. And the strange thing is that you'll find in books on yoga almost never any mention of pratyahara. They'll say what I've just said, that that's what it is, and they rarely give any practice. They say that you have to withdraw the senses, learn to withdraw the senses, and then they go straight to dharana, because dharana, there are plenty of practices and things, but they don't give practices usually. Most texts are rather silent on what pratyahara actually means, how you perform it. But this is a step in the Eightfold Steps. So it has everything in the steps of yoga, in the whole text of yoga, including the Eightfold Steps, is aimed at practicality, meant for action, meant for practice, meant for doing something, for attaining the goal of liberation. Swami Vivekananda gives a practice in his which gave me a clue to the understanding I'm going to give you of pratyahara. So let me say that this is my understanding, and I think it's correct, but every crazy person thinks that their crazy ideas are correct. So I want to tell you that this is my understanding of pratyahara that I came to through a clue in Swami Vivekananda's works and through the logic of the process of meditation also. So just take it as some offbeat Swami's offbeat idea that may have something to it and may not have something to it. But I think there is something to it. And it's true to my experience and true to what I have studied about meditation and practiced of meditation. So Swami Vivekananda gives the practice for pratyahara. He says, just watch the mind. Don't try to control it. Just watch as thoughts arise. And let thoughts come and let thoughts go. But you just be the observer of the thoughts. Don't get involved in them. Just watch them rise and set. So let's try that for a minute. Just close your eyes and just watch thoughts rise and set. Now, the first thing you notice is, and you can keep your eyes closed to continue doing it for a few moments more. The first thing you'll notice is that when you try to watch your thoughts, they suddenly get shy. And they find that the mind's not doing anything for the first time in ages. But then, if you want to do the practice, you try to stimulate a little bit of thought and get the thoughts bubbling, and then they start bubbling up. But then you just sit and watch them. So do that for a moment. Just try to stimulate some thought, even if you have to do it artificially, and then watch the thoughts bubbling up. Well, now I'll continue with the explanation rather than the exercise, but it's a good exercise to do, and I'll give more explanation about it so you can do it on your own further. It's a very good exercise, and it's actually an exercise taught in Buddhism, type of mindfulness practice. The Buddha himself taught this. He taught the awareness of the breathing, he taught the awareness of the emotions, the awareness of the body, the awareness of the mind. So this is awareness, mindfulness of the mind, watching the mind. You're not trying to control the mind. That you do in dharana. But here you're not trying to control the mind. You're letting the mind wander on, but you just watch it. And what you'll see happening is, from time to time, you're watching it, thoughts are bubbling up, and everything's going fine for some seconds. And then suddenly some thought catches your attention. And then you're carried away. And then after some time you realize, oh, I was supposed to be sitting here watching the thoughts, but I've been thinking about going grocery shopping and what I needed to get, and then from there I needed to go to the hardware store and all of that. So let me step back and just watch. And so then you watch it a little bit more, and then you find, again, the mind was caught. Oh, that some thought of a TV show that you saw comes up, and you think, oh, I want to catch the next in that series that's coming on tomorrow night. I got to be sure to. And then again you catch yourself and you step back. So you learn about the mind, and you learn about the outgoing tendency of the mind is one thing that this exercise does. And you learn how the mind, random thoughts are constantly bubbling up in our minds, And so when we're relaxing on a Sunday afternoon after the Vedanta retreat and you're exhausted and thank God I'm back home and can rest now and don't have to listen to any more talks, which might have been interesting, but I've had about as much as my mind can take. Let me just sit here and relax. And so then I start daydreaming. That's just the bubbling up of the things in the mind. And so the mind is always doing that, either in the form of daydreaming when we let it go completely, or even when we're engaged in our ordinary activities, the mind is just bubbling up with thoughts. And we see that when we sit for meditation. But what happens is, with the bubbling up of thoughts, we keep finding thoughts that are interesting, and we hook into them. Or our interest is hooked by the thought, and it carries us away. And so one of the first things we learn when we try to meditate is that I am not in control of my own mind. My mind does what it wants to do. It's not I who control the mind controls me. And it's not even the conscious mind that controls me, because consciously I want to meditate. That's what I want to do. I want to concentrate. I want to meditate. But something in the mind, something besides my conscious will, is hooking and carrying me away without my permission. And so I have to get control of the mind. And so meditation, one of the first things that we learn in meditation is that meditation is not the ordinary state of the mind. The mind doesn't want to do it. That's contrary to the actual nature of the mind. What we find as the mind becomes purer, the nature of the mind is to meditate. The nature of the mind is to be concentrated. So why isn't that its nature now? It's because of the perversion of the mind. Because the mind has become perverse through lifetimes of contrary habit. That's an important idea, especially in the modern age, because in the modern age, this idea of being natural is what everyone wants. And so spiritual life is sometimes considered to be unnatural. It's unnatural. You're trying to control your tendencies, which are quite natural. You're trying to control your mind, which is quite unnatural. Just let it all go. Just be natural. And back in the hippie days, when I was growing up, coming of age, there was a cartoon series, a hippie cartoon series called Mr. Natural. And so we all want to be Mr. Natural. Just let it all hang out, as they used to say. No, we find that the natural tendency of the mind, how do we know it's the natural tendency of the mind? Because when the mind becomes clear, its natural tendency is to become focused. The natural tendency is to flow towards something higher. It's when the mind is cloudy, when the mind is restless, when the mind is disturbed, when the mind is confused. That's the state that we find ourselves in now. So this is not the natural state of the mind. The natural state is an elevated state. And because the mind has become so perverse through lifetimes of contrary activity, we have to work now to get back to the natural state. So pratyahara. Another thing that, one of the things we learn again in this practice of observing the mind is how thoughts are constantly bubbling up, and how sometimes the thoughts hook into our interest and carry us away without us even knowing it, and then we're long gone before we realize, no, I was supposed to be doing something else. Another thing that we learn, which is a very great help both in the practice of yoga and in the practice of Advaita Vedanta, is we begin to get the sense that I'm the observer of the mind. I'm not the mind. I'm not the mind. That in the Kena Upanishad, Kena means what? In Sanskrit, Kena means by what, by which, by whom. And it's named the Kena Upanishad. In English it doesn't work, the by whom Upanishad. That doesn't make much sense. But the first verse begins with the word Kena. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha. Kena prana pratava praiti yukta. Keneshitam vachamimam vadanti. Chakshu shrotram ko devo yunakti. So by whom is this mind directed? By whom is this mind directed? The intent of the question is, for whose purpose is the mind functioning? For whose purpose is the mind functioning? Right now we are like people, the driver of a carriage, horse carriage, who has lost the reins of the horse and has no way to control them, and the horses are running wherever they go. And you have a destination to go to, but you have no control over the horses, and the horses want to go everywhere except for where you want to go. And so that's the way the mind is now. But we, as the driver of the carriage, we have to get hold of the reins again so that we can get to our destination. So pratyahara, or this exercise, let me not yet say pratyahara, this exercise of watching the mind, that begins to show us what's going on so that we can begin to get the reins, and we again become the charioteer, not the victim of the horse's whims. We can begin to rein in the horses, and then we can get to our proper destination. So now, from this exercise that Swami Vivekananda teaches, and which the Buddha himself taught, most of you know of Vipassana practice, very popular in Theravada Buddhism, very popular in the West now, and a very good and effective exercise. That is watching the breath, watching it flow in and flow out. There's more to it than that, but that's the basis of the foundation of the practice, watching the breath flow in and flow out. But this watching of the mind is the same practice when directed towards the mind. In Vipassana, you don't try to control the breath, you just watch it. In watching the mind, you don't try to control the mind, you let the mind run on, but you just watch it. Another thing that happens as you watch it, again, first when you start watching it, you find the mind just becomes shy and shuts up. And I want to watch something. Something has to happen or I'm not practicing anything. So you have to stimulate the mind and get it thinking, and then it sort of loses its shyness and starts bubbling up with activity, and then you sit back and watch. But as you watch, then you find that naturally the mind again begins to become quiet. Again, the mind becomes quiet in a natural process. It doesn't, this time it's not shyness. Before it was shyness, because the mind is just waiting for you to stop looking before it can go back to doing what it was doing. but now the mind is beginning to say, well, this is no fun. He's not going to go away, so I might as well just stay quiet. And so gradually the mind becomes quieter, and then you find that it's easier to direct the mind in meditation. So this is a very good thing. to do at the beginning of your meditation practice, just to get the mind a little quiet, and do it day after day as you get better at it, to get the mind quiet, and then to think of this as a way of getting the mind to stop chasing after thoughts, the senses to stop chasing after objects, and just to be centered in the self, not self-centered in the way that we use that term in English. Self-centered in English, we could use self-centered for this, but that's already been co-opted by the language to talk about an egotistical person. So, to avoid making people think that we're talking about egocentric self-centeredness, no, learn to center yourself within yourself rather than out there. So pratyahara is a process for, and I'll tie the two together, pratyahara is a process for bringing the mind in here and having the mind seated in here rather than going out. As I said the other day, I forget whether it was yesterday morning or the first day, I think it was the first day, Thursday. Normally our sense is that my center of gravity is out there. My sense of self-worth is located out there. My sense of value is located out there. My sense of purpose is located out there, outside of myself. My sense of purpose is getting things done, taking care of this, taking care of that, getting a career and all of this. All of my sense of purpose is something connected out there. My sense of value is out there. What does that mean? I think I'm a good person if everybody smiles at me and pats me on the back. I think I'm a bad person if everybody frowns at me and curses me. My sense of value is tied to what the confirmation I get from other people, the affirmation or negation I get from other people. Why should that be? My sense of value, my sense of everything is tied to things out there, a sense of purpose, value, my sense of self, my sense of self-worth, everything tied to out there. So in spiritual life, one of the things we have to do is to learn to be centered in the self. If I am the Purusha, as they call it in yoga, the conscious self, pure consciousness, infinite consciousness, or the Atman, as we call it in Vedanta. If I am that, then value is here, purpose is here, the goal is here, everything is here. If we make that transition, and pratyahara helps us with that, it's one of the steps towards that, if we make that transition, it's a tremendous change in life. Swami Atmarupananda mentioned, I think he mentioned Copernicus. No, maybe not, the other day. Maybe he mentioned something that reminded me of Copernicus. Anyway, I often use this analogy. Before the time of Copernicus, we had Ptolemaic astronomy, where the Earth was at the center of the universe and the heavens spun around the Earth. And that's a legitimate way of looking at the universe. There's no earthly reason, no pun intended. I just realized it was a pun after I said it, or a play on words. But there's no real reason for saying that that we can't look on the heavens that way, because there's no center that we can find to the universe. And so you have to have some frame of reference, so why not take the Earth as a frame of reference? And so you can do that. And that's what was done in the West until from the time of Ptolemy and even before, up to the time of Copernicus. And so you could calculate the movements of the heavens, thinking of the Earth as still and the heavens swirling around us. But the calculations were terribly complicated. And that was at a time when computational mathematics in the West was not very developed. In the West, geometrical mathematics was far more advanced than computational, because we didn't have a digital system. We didn't have the 10-based number system. If you think of VI times XLIX, and you try to work that out computationally, you're in trouble. But if you have the 10-based number system, so-called Arabic numbers, which actually are Sanskritic numbers or Indic numbers, not Arabic numbers. We got them from the Arabs, who got them from India. If you have that, then computational mathematics becomes much easier. So again, you can calculate the movements of the heavens, but it's very difficult, even with computational mathematics, taking the Earth as still. But Copernicus found that if you take the sun as the center of the solar system and the planets are moving around that, And then the stars appear to move because of the rotation and the revolution of the Earth. Suddenly the computations become very simple. It's very simple. Before that, the difference between the movements of planets and the movements of the stars, that itself was a big confusion. It could be calculated, but with great difficulty. But suddenly, with the Copernican revolution, the heavens became relatively simple. And so in the same way, with this Copernican revolution, that my center of gravity is not out there, my center of gravity is here. My reality is not out there, my reality is here. My self-worth is not out there, my self-worth is here. My purpose is not out there, my purpose is here. Then the whole view of life changes. It becomes vastly simplified. Things that never made sense, suddenly they make sense. And so, pratyahara, to me, after seeing that clue in Swami Vivekananda's commentary, where he took that particular type of mindfulness exercise, it's clear that it means withdrawing of the senses, but how do you do that? And that's why most books on yoga don't even give exercises for pratyahara, because it's not given in the Yoga Sutras. But if you think of mindfulness practices as a way of mindfulness practice, mindfulness is a term from Buddhism, but I'm using it here because it's a well-known term. Mindfulness practice is different from concentrative meditation. And pratyahara has to be different from dharana. Pratyahara, withdrawing the senses, has to be different from concentration because it's given as a separate step before concentration. And so what mindfulness is, you're not trying to focus on something, you're not trying to control something, you're not trying to bring the mind to one point. You're just watching, just watching. The thing about, there are several defining characteristics of any mindfulness practice. One is, you're not imagining anything. You're watching the breath. You don't have to imagine the breath, I hope. And you're not trying to control the mind, and you don't have to control the mind, to imagine the mind either. You're just watching something which is there. Mindfulness of the body, the sensations in the body. You'll find practicing Buddhists who are practicing the mindfulness of the body, you'll find them walking very deliberately, where they're feeling every movement of the foot as it touches the ground, and the rolling of the foot up and coming down again and rolling. You'll find that in the practice of mindfulness of the body, they're paying attention to everything they do. If they go to pick up a book while practicing, they'll do it extremely slowly and notice every sensation as it happens, and very slowly do everything very deliberately, so that everything is conscious. So the one of the defining characteristics of mindfulness is, it's not imagining anything, it's watching something which is present. Another is the development of attention, just learning to pay attention to what is there. What is the value of that? Well, the Buddha said that, the Buddha himself and the Buddhist tradition said that through mindfulness comes enlightenment. And so mindfulness, just like pranayama can lead to enlightenment, just like Ishvara pranidhana can lead to enlightenment, surrender to God can lead to enlightenment. So the Buddha said that mindfulness itself can lead to enlightenment. And so, but if we take it as a step along the way, it's one of the missing steps in our practice of meditation. It's one of the missing steps in our practice of meditation. If we practiced some form of mindfulness, we would find meditation so much easier. But why? When we sit for meditation and we're told, okay, now concentrate on this. Concentrate on this mantra, concentrate on this form, concentrate on this light in the heart, concentrate on this diagram, whatever it is we meditate on. We find that the mind just wanders away. But if we've made a practice of steadying our attention, not focusing it, but just watching, then when we do that and we start meditation with that, with just a mind which is trained in just being aware and just watching, then we find it far easier to bring the mind into focus and to direct it towards something. And when we lose attention, we bring back to mindfulness, and then we bring it into focus. Back to mindfulness, and then into focus. But without mindfulness, we find that the mind just goes all over the place, and it refuses to come down to the practice of concentration. And so again, pratyahara means withdrawing the attention from the senses. How do we do that? Okay, sit here and just withdraw your attention from the senses. What do you do? Well, I just withdraw my attention from the senses. We'll just try it. You just sit there thinking about what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be doing? At the most, you can close your eyes, but unfortunately, we can't even close our ears. Of course, you can go like that, but so we need a practice for withdrawing the mind from the senses. And mindfulness is the one practice I know which does what pratyahara is supposed to do, and which is the best preparation I know for the practice of concentration. And so to me, pratyahara is at least it at least includes the practice of mindfulness. There may be something else Patanjali also had in mind. There may be something, other things that form mindfulness practice, but certainly it includes mindfulness practice, pratyahara. Because that's what it does. It brings the mind away from going after the senses. It brings the mind away from the stream of consciousness. Brings the mind back from daydreaming. All of these problems we have in meditation. It brings the mind away from sleep when the mind wants to go to sleep, and that we find is the other problem in meditation. Either the mind goes to sleep or it starts daydreaming and stream of consciousness and following thoughts into infinity. Mindfulness is a great help to bring the mind here, to bring it and have the attention here, and the power to sustain attention, power of sustained attention. We talk about the 5-minute attention span. Would that we had a 5-minute attention span. So let's develop a 5-minute attention span first, and then expand that. So pratyahara, and so he says in 54. Tata parama vashyatendriyanam. Thence arises supreme control of the organs. Okay, that's still. Oh no, I'm sorry. 54 is what I wanted, yes. Swavishoyasam prayoge chitta swarupanukara eva indriyanam pratyahara. So pratyahara is the drawing in of the organs. That is, drawing in of the senses plus the mind, which is sometimes considered the sixth sense organ. Not in the sense we talk about, he has the sixth sense as a psychic power or something, but it's considered the sixth sense organ in an ordinary sense. And taking the form of the mind stuff, as it were. So we withdraw from the senses, and the mind takes the form of its own mind stuff. That is, it's not taking other forms. That is, the attention withdraws within ourselves, not following the senses, not following the stream of consciousness of the mind. And then 55, he says, Tata parama vashyatendriyanam. Tata parama vashyata indriyanam. From this comes supreme control of the senses. From this comes supreme control of the senses. And that also is one of the aims and one of the purposes of mindfulness practice. Through that you get self-possession of the organs. Possession of the organs. Now in yoga, the heights of pratyahara are said to be, and Swami Vivekananda talks about this elsewhere from his Raja Yoga, because he gave many, many classes on Raja Yoga. His book Raja Yoga is just a sampling of the things he taught on Raja Yoga. Elsewhere he says that if I don't want to hear something, I should be able to tell the ear not to hear, and I don't hear. Even though the ear is present, the sound is present, no, but I should have the power to withdraw the mind. If I don't want to smell something, I should be able to tell the nose, don't smell it. Not by going like that, but just by saying, no, I'm not going to smell. And so that's the ultimate control of the senses. That comes through pratyahara. If I can withdraw my attention from the senses, and just to be established in awareness, then I get that type of control eventually. So that's pratyahara. So then we go to chapter 3, the chapter on Vibhuti-pada, on the powers. So it's called the... Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks. So Vibhuti-pada, the chapter on psychic powers. Not just psychic, but it's really the powers that come through the application of ultimate concentration on anything. The way that the universe gives up its secrets, and particulars within the universe give up their secrets through the power of concentration. So let me say a word about that before we come to dharana and dhyana and samadhi. Why concentrate the mind? I once was at a conference. In fact, I was at a conference here in San Diego at an Episcopal church, and there was a Canadian Tibetan Lama, Canadian by birth, but ordained as a Tibetan Lama, who was there also as part of this. They were having a day-long retreat at this Episcopal church, and it was part of the day was to be given to walking meditation. And so each of us was to give a walking meditation, and then we were also to give guided meditations, sitting guided meditations. So it was a very nice day, very good. And I won't mention this Lama's name, but a good person and somebody I've seen elsewhere also, very nice and good, sincere practitioner. But he said in his talk on meditation, he said that the Tibetan Lama, Canadian Tibetan Lama, I think and I will say that concentration of the mind is impossible. You cannot concentrate the mind. That's just impossible. People talk about yogic meditation and concentrating the mind and everything. That's just a useless exercise. The mind is by nature active. It's always active. And so all you can do is just to watch the mind. And so that he was talking about basically mindfulness practice. Or as a Swami not belonging to our order, and also a good man whom I knew, belonging to another Vedanta tradition, as he used to say, that if you can't control the minds, the waves of the mind, then learn to surf them. And it showed a picture of this Swami in Kopinam surfing on a surfboard in the ocean, actually surfing. And so if you can't control your mind, the waves of the mind, then at least learn to ride them. And so this idea that you cannot concentrate the mind, concentration is impossible. No, that's foolishness. Otherwise, why would people have taught concentrative exercises for so many thousands of years from the dawn of history? So the practice of concentration, why do we try to practice focusing meditation? Mindfulness is good. That's a wonderful exercise, and you can develop that very, very far. But yogic meditation, that is concentrative meditation, is good also. And as Swami Vivekananda said, that's the way we get all knowledge. The astronomer focuses mind through the telescope, and the heavens give up their secrets. The biologist focuses her mind through the microscope, and the microscopic world gives up its secrets. The linguist focuses his mind on the nature of language, and language gives up its secrets. The chemist focuses her mind on the nature of the chemical elements, and they give up their secrets. And so concentration is the one way that we get knowledge. The problem is that usually we can only concentrate on things that we want to concentrate on. The mind goes towards what it wants to. So if I love music, I find it very easy just to sit back and listen to music and be absorbed in it. That's good. Nothing wrong with that. But that's not yogic concentration, because that's following the tendency of the mind itself. Concentration means I say, mind, you sit here, and the mind sits there. It's like doggy training, going to dog training school with your dog. I say sit, you sit. I say roll over, you roll over. But ordinary concentration, the artist who's good at painting, they can concentrate, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a wonderful thing. And art can be used as yoga also. But just painting elegant and effective painting because you're good at painting, that doesn't make you a yogi by itself, because that's following the tendency of your own mind, the tendency of your... So concentration means learning to focus the mind because you have told the mind to focus there. And so real concentration is the ability to focus the mind at will, not because I like to do something. Now, I should say also that when we take a topic for concentration, because now we're coming to the next step, which is dharana, concentration. When we take a topic for concentration, it is helpful to take something which is inspiring to us, because the mind will more easily go towards it. But still, we're developing the power of concentration because the mind doesn't want to stay there for long. Again, with art or music, there's enough going on that the mind stays engaged, at least for a while. But if you're told, okay, now focus on a deity, or focus on a chosen ideal, or focus on a beautiful light within the heart, the mind finds it inspiring for a few seconds, and then it wants to do something else. And so you're still learning actual yogic concentration by doing that. But it is helpful for many to take something which is naturally inspiring, or something like a chosen ideal, like in the case in our tradition, many people have Sri Ramakrishna or the Holy Mother to concentrate on, and you picture them as living, full of love, full of light, full of wisdom, full of compassion, sitting within your heart and looking at you with the living eyes, looking at you. And so it's an appealing image that makes it easy to stay there a little longer, but still the mind wants to wander away, so you bring it back, and that is concentration. So what does he say dharana is? Deshabandhas chittasya dharana. Dharana is keeping the mind in one spot. Deshabandha, refining it to a space. One of the strange things and I am going to go into my question period because I can't help it, because this is the only time I have to finish with dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So I'll just warn you. I won't go over time, and I'll leave some time for question and answers, but I am going to go over. I've already gone over the 45 minutes for the talk. Now, what was I going to say about the dharana? What's that? Yes, I was in dharana. Deshabandha, yes, thank you, Deshabandhas. The strange thing is that in the West, there is the idea of what distinguishes the mind from matter. The mind is non-spatial. Matter occupies space, and the mind is non-spatial. This is a strong idea that has been the foundation of Western thinking about the mind and the body. And it's all nonsense. It's obvious nonsense. You can see that it's nonsense. How people could call themselves thinkers and think that the mind is non-spatial and that matter occupies space. All of our thinking takes place within the mental space. Our thoughts themselves are spatial. The perceptions that we have that arise in the mind are spatial. Memories are spatial. Everything that arises in the mind has a spatial aspect. And so that's why in the Hindu tradition they have the idea of bhutakasha, this physical space, then chittakasha, the mental space. And then they have the chidakasha, the space of consciousness, which is not really a space. It's beyond space and time, but just by analogy, it's a space. Although a distinction can be made that there is a space of consciousness which is space-like before we realize the transcendental consciousness. That is, when we're approaching consciousness and aware of consciousness, aware of ourselves as consciousness, when we're witnessing, the witnessing takes place within a space also. That's a limited space, but the full realization of the consciousness is beyond space and time. And so it's called chidakasha only by analogy. So concentration means you're concentrate on something within a space, deshabandha, confined to a space, confining the mind to a spot. So that can be external, like you can take a golf ball and meditate on that. And that's a perfectly good meditation. You can take the flame of a candle and meditate on that. That's a perfectly good and traditional meditation. Golf balls are not traditional because they didn't play golf. But it could become a new tradition. A ping pong ball would be better because it doesn't have little dents all over it, and so it's uniform. And in fact, the Buddha, he taught the Kashina exercises where you have a circle of a color, and you put it in front of you at basically at eye level, and you just focus on that circle of color. And different colors were used for different purposes. And Swami Vivekananda said that samadhi can be attained simply by concentrating on a black spot. You can have a black dot. Swami Vivekananda himself did that. You can draw a black dot on a paper and focus on that until everything else disappears, and you enter into samadhi by focusing on that dot. And so it can be something outside yourself, if that's easier, or it can be inside, like that is thinking of a light within the heart, thinking of a flame within the heart, thinking of a cloud of light within the heart, thinking of the Ishta Devata, the chosen ideal, thinking of Jesus or Buddha or Ramakrishna or Kali or Shiva within the heart. It can be a yantra, a geometric design representing a deity. Or it can be meditation on a mantra without a form also. Often we're told to meditate on a mantra plus a form, but one can meditate just on the mantra as well, just on the sound. Or it can be just on an idea. So there are various types of meditation, or concentration. But concentration is, it's here, or 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 the Muladhara, the basic at the base of the spine, something like that. But it's always desha bandha. You're trying to focus the mind on a space, on a spot. That's what defines it. And when we say that, I practice meditation, and if we say I meditate, that's fine, that's a good use of the term, but we should know that I'm practicing meditation. Because as we'll see in a moment, meditation is a state. And so what most of us are doing is practicing dharana, concentration, because many people, so many people over the years come and say, and it's a good legitimate question, one which I once had also, that Maharaj, I try to focus my mind, but it keeps running away. That's what everybody's problem is. One of my teachers told me that even if a great man, and a truly great man, and a genius like Albert Einstein, because he was not just a genius, but he was a good man, even if someone like Albert Einstein had turned to the practice of meditation, he would have had the same problem. His mind would have run away every time he tried to focus it on something. Yes, in mathematics, physics, he could concentrate and do all of that. But meditation is not that, not doing what you want to do because you want to do it and because you're interested in it or something, or because the boss said you had to do it and so you've got pressure behind you and you've got to get it done. No, here, you have chosen to focus on something. And so he would have the same problem. So dharana means you put your mind on the object you're trying to concentrate on, internal or external, and the mind runs away. And you realize it after some time, it ran away, you bring it back. And after some, you find that the mind ran away. And when you realize it, you bring it back, and the mind runs away. That is the practice of concentration. That can't be helped. It's not the permanent state, but that goes on for years for most of us, for years and years for most of us. The thing is that the only way you're going to go beyond that is by doing it again and again. If you sit for meditation with the intention that I'm going to meditate, and you sit down and you think for a moment, and then suddenly the mind runs away, but you don't know it. And then after 45 minutes, you look at the clock, you open your you realize what happened, and I'm thinking about all sorts of things. You open your eyes and see the clock and see that, oh, the time for my meditation is up, I've got to get up. You didn't waste your time. You didn't waste your time. You made a sankalpa, you made an intention that I'm going to sit for meditation. And I have done that. That much I've done. The mind has run away. Yes, that's not the purpose of why I sat, but that's what happens. And that's what happened this time. So that's okay. That idea in the Gita of karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Yours is the right to the fruit, not to the fruits of action. Yours is the right to the work, not to the fruits of the work. That applies to meditation also. So when you find yourself, are we there yet? Are we there thinking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Am I meditating? Am I meditating? Why aren't I there yet? No, forget about that. Ours is to do the practice, It doesn't matter how long it takes. Maybe we've been practicing meditation for several lifetimes. This is another one. But if we practice sincerely, we'll begin to see benefits. And in fact, benefits are happening every time you sit for meditation, even when your mind has run away. You're getting benefit then and there. It's just that you don't see it because we're looking for big benefits. We're looking for enlightenment and bliss and the solution to all life's problems and all of that. We don't notice that we're gradually becoming better persons. We're becoming more centered in the correct way. The mind is becoming more pliant and so forth. Every time you sit for meditation, whether the mind wanders or not, it's helping you. So concentration practice is trying to put the mind on a object of concentration, and then it's going to run away. That's distinguished from dhyana, which is in Sutra 2, tatra pratyayekatanata dhyanam. So dhyanam is tatra, in that, tatra means there. So you put your mind on this object of meditation, pratyaya ekatanata, the continuous flow of the mind towards that object. So meditation is a state. It's a state which is brought about by willpower, you're trying to do it. One of the characteristics of meditation which distinguishes it from the last step, which is samadhi, which we'll come to in a moment, is that you're exercising the will to do it, to concentrate. You're saying, okay, I'm going to keep my mind focused here. That takes willpower to do it. But the difference between this and dharana is you put the mind in dharana, and after a few moments the mind runs away. You bring it back, and after a little while the mind runs away. But in dhyana, suddenly you put the mind there, and one day it just stays. You put the mind where it's supposed to be, and suddenly it stays. That just happens someday. Just one day after a long practice you find, and maybe it happens, and then for 2-3 years it doesn't happen again, and then it comes back. And so dhyana is what happens when the mind spontaneously stays on its object. But still it's with the willpower, and you still have the power to say, okay, now I'm going to stop, and you take the mind off, and then you go about your business. Samadhi is what comes next. 3, Taraivarthamatra nibhasam swarupa shunyam eva samadhi. Samadhi is Taraivarthamatra nibhasam. The object alone shines. Swarupa shunyam eva. As if the nature of the mind has disappeared. So you're meditating, say you're meditating on the Holy Mother. You're meditating on the Holy Mother, and suddenly the Holy Mother alone is there in your mind. The living Holy Mother is there. And the sense that I am meditating on the Holy Mother, that's gone. The sense that I'm meditating on her, no, just Holy Mother is there. So the mind has, as though, the sense that I am meditating, that is gone. In dhyana, that sense is still there, but it's working. The mind is flowing. But in samadhi, that's distinguished by the fact that suddenly the sense of separation from the object and the sense of willpower that I have to hold the mind onto that. And so samadhi happens with, it comes about by the exercise of will, but in the state itself, the will, as it were, disappears. And so that's why in the state of samadhi, one doesn't have a sense of how much time has passed. If one enters into samadhi, after one comes out, one might look at the clock and have some inclination of how long that they were in that state. Otherwise, there's no idea of how long you were there, because in the state of samadhi, it's just one wave that keeps rising in the mind continuously without a break. And time is what? Time is the perception of change. And when there's no change, there's no perception of time. Practically no perception. There is an extremely subtle perception of time, because wave after wave, the same wave is continually arising. So there's an extremely subtle sense of time, but it has almost no correlation with clock time. And so in that state you have no idea you're there. Just the mind is stopped. And the living image that you are meditating on is just there. And no sense that I was meditating, just the reality of that. And so that is samadhi, and that's what gives up that's the ultimate concentration. And now I'm going to conclude, and if there's time. Is there time for question and answers? 1 minute?
7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay. So let me just say that he says that dharana, dhyana, samadhi, when they follow each other, that becomes samyama. And by practicing samyama, these step-by-step concentration, the universe gives up its secrets. Okay, ready. So your question.
Now, Swamiji. So, of course, there is a process of meditation, and then you get to a state where your mind is running, you watch it, and there is this concentration that happens, and there is this state that takes over of its own. So I want to ask if that is dhyan or that is samadhi.
Yes. The distinction between dhyana and samadhi is that in dhyana, you put the mind on the object of meditation, you're concentrating, but then suddenly the mind just stays there. And it just flows towards the object of meditation. But you still have the sense that I am meditating. You're not thinking, I am meditating. You're not using words to think and everything, but you're focused on that. But there is the sense of distinction, that there is a process that's going on, and that the mind is flowing towards the object of concentration. It becomes samadhi when that sense of I am meditating on this, that completely disappears. And the Arthamatra Nirbhasa, the object itself just shines in its the light of consciousness. It's the light of consciousness which makes it shine. And the separate identity of the mind seems to be gone. And there's no sense of process. There's no sense that I am doing this, I'm trying to do it, I've got to keep the mind here. That's gone. It's a spontaneous state.
Yeah, and then there is only awareness, and then after a while it goes away. So you come back.
Yes, you come back from samadhi.
Why does that happen?
We'll come back from samadhi because of the power of samskaras, that is, past impressions. They only allow us to remain in that state for the length of time that we have, that our karma allows, until all of the seeds of the mind are burnt up, and then we attain to liberation. But until then, our samskaras bring that back. So make it quick, because there are two other people,
One moment. So I want to know, how do I stay in that awareness while I'm even functioning like I'm doing my karma yoga? How do I keep the awareness going?
Okay, well now, when you're doing karma yoga, you won't be in samadhi, but you want to remain in a state of awareness. Yes. And so that is only by practice, just by again and again bringing the mind back to, and there's an area where, again, something like mindfulness practice is very helpful, because that teaches you how to be aware in the midst of everything that you're doing. Or another way is to do something like japa, so that even when you're doing work, the stream of japa is continually going on in the mind. So part of your mind is absorbed in meditation. So either you keep the mind focused on something like japa in the midst of your activity, or you keep your mind focused on the activity through mindfulness. So,
thank you, Swami.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Swami. If you were to bring in a practice such as pranayama, such as alternate nostril breathing, at which point would you do that in this process that you described this morning, or would you not? Is that something different?
Okay, at which point would you introduce a pranayama type practice? You mean like in one sitting at what point, or at what point in your life's process? So you're talking about a particular sitting at what point, or at what time in your life would you?
I'm talking about it, I guess, in a particular sitting.
Yes.
Is it wise to bring it in? You've given us these steps here.
Yes.
Is it wise to bring in yet another thing, such as an alternate nostril breathing?
Yes, that can be done. Again, that would be something that you do towards the beginning of your practice. What I would say, and this is just a suggestion, this is not laying down rules or anything, but what I would say generally, for me, what I find best is to begin with a prayer or something, either a prayer or an affirmation. An affirmation in the sense of a statement of truth, that I want to be my constant thought. And then do some alternate breathing or pranayama as is appropriate to my level. And then a awareness exercise, mindfulness exercise, and then go into, so it depends on how much time you have, and each of these can be short. You don't have to be, okay, I'm going to do 20 minutes of alternate breathing. No, you can do a minute of alternate breathing, and that itself will help. And you can do a few minutes just of mindfulness, 2 or 3 minutes of mindfulness, and that itself will help, and then go into your meditation if your time is short. But all of those can be done together, yes. But all breathing would be towards the beginning. So now back behind you, yes.
Oh, there's Joan in the corner.
Oh, okay. Up here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just found this format incredibly beneficial.
Oh, good.
Because it integrates several dimensions all in one. So I hope we have similar formats again.
Talk to Swami Harinamananda.
My question was on the in meditation and in what is outside the mat. They seem to mirror each other, as reality. And while ahankara does diminish, the kartrutvam is insidious and incessantly cunning. So I recall the early days, so there was no ego in movie going or anything, but I was tremendously invested, and I could remember who took my book and didn't bring it back or didn't bring it back in good condition.
Yeah.
And back in the 70s, you didn't get good translations. So, if my wait list was usurped and someone else got it. Till today I remember that. So that Kartrut Bhavna, you need some of that because, I'm in two minds about whether this is quite a Brahminic tradition because it requires some amount of rajas or that warrior spirit to the stick-with-itness, the constant coming back, continuity of practice. So there's that dichotomy I noticed that ahankar can get soft, but that kartrutva bhavana
Okay, now
completely doesn't disappear, but that is what you need at the end.
Yes,
So,
yes.
both on the mat and off the mat, do you have any suggestions for that?
Yes, yes. Now, kartrutva bhava means the sense of being an agent of action. That I am the karta, I am the doer. I am the speaker giving a talk. I'm the cook cooking the meal. I am the wife or I am the husband taking care of my duties. I am the person who's taking care of this job at work and so forth. This sense of being the doer. That's the kartrutva bhava. And so that will remain as long as we are engaged in action. There is something to do with it so that it doesn't become an obstacle. But as Sri Ramakrishna said, that the ashwatha tree, if you chop it down, it comes right back up from a sprout. And so the ego is like that. You can chop it down all you like and you find it sprouts up. When the Buddha said, according to Sir Edwin Arnold's The Light of Asia, about the life of Buddha, when Buddha addresses Mara and says, "Oh, I have found thee out. I have found thee, O builder of this tabernacle." Yes. So who is saying I? It's the karta of Buddha, the kartaham of Buddha, the sense I am the doer of Buddha. But the difference is that the Buddha is no longer limited by the sense of karta. He knows that there is, in Buddhist language, I'll put it in Buddhist language, that there is no self. In Vedantic language, he knows that he is the self and not the doer. And yet, when he's addressing Mara, he says, "I have found you out." So it's the illumined ego of Buddha. So even in a realized soul, when Shankaracharya goes to argue with different schools of philosophers, who is doing the arguing? Is it just argument happening? No, it's Shankaracharya. I'm going to argue with these. But it's the illumined ego which has no power to bind. As Sri Ramakrishna said, it's like a rope which is on the ground which has been burnt. It's just ash. You pick it up and try to bind something with it and you can't. It's just ash. But it's still there, the image of the rope. And so the karta, the correct way to deal with it, the ego, the sense that I am the doer, is not to try to destroy it. And those teachers I've seen who try to destroy the egos of their disciples through just smashing the ego again and again, that is extremely destructive. Yes, sometimes somebody needs to be put down and put in their place by a good teacher. There's a legitimate place for that. But again and again, just beating the ego on the head, what I've seen is that the people who have received that treatment, even from great teachers, the ego keeps coming out in perverse ways. And that's because the ego can't be crushed. And so Sri Ramakrishna said, he used rather colorful language in Bengali. He said, make the shala, make it the servant of God. He said, if the ego keeps rising up, then turn it into the servant of God. So, remember, Patanjali says, Ishvara pranidhanad, from the Ishvara pranidhana, one can attain to samadhi itself by surrender to God. So I can think either the two main ways, and they're sub-paths, but the two main categories of ways. One is that God is the doer, I'm not the doer, I'm just the instrument. The other way is to think, I am consciousness itself. Let me see the body and mind working, and when the I comes up, let me stand back and see it as an object. It's not me. I'm the light of awareness. And the sense that I, Swami Atmarupananda, am going to do such and such, that's all happening within consciousness. It has nothing to do with me. It just happens. So either surrender it or disengage with it. But it's going to be there. And the last thing, let me say, because time is already up, is that I say that I'm going to walk from here to the back to eat lunch now. That's stupid. That's a stupid statement. I'm going to walk. I don't know how to walk. You don't know how to walk. Nobody knows how to walk. The ego is an imposter that takes credit for everything. Do I know how to walk? Well, all of the incredible, intricate motions, the muscles in the legs, the nervous impulses, the sense of balance, keeping my balance. I don't know what I'm doing. I just think I'm going to walk, and it happens. And yet the ego says I'm going to walk. I say I'm going to give a talk. That's stupid. Do I know how to talk? I don't know how to talk. You see, all of the number of nervous impulses, the muscular movements, the control of the breath, the diaphragm, the thinking of turning thoughts into words and all of that. Do I know what I'm doing? I have no idea. No idea. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to walk. So if I realize that, then it's much easier either to be the witness or to say, Mother, you please take over. I say I'm the doer, but Mother, you are the doer. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.